All right, we are back talking about Survivor 41. We just had episode 7, and what an episode that was in terms of not only the vote out, but also the how it changes up the power rankings moving forward. So, now that we actually had a regular vote out and the merge is on, it is time to rank all the players based on how likely I think it is that they'll win the game. Now, I actually think there's quite a bit of movement from this past week as we got a lot of answers to certain questions I had earlier, and I feel like with that, I'm able to have a better sense of where the game is going. But there are also a lot of questions, and I think it'll be fun to speculate where the game might be going and who will probably win this season based on what we've seen so far. So, with that said, let's get started. So, starting off the list with number 12, we have the merge boot of the episode. We have Sydney. Now, for those of you who've been following my power rankings for the last few weeks, I've pegged Sydney as a merge boot for quite a while now, to the point where I literally put her below people like Erika and Heather, who have worse edits than Sydney, but were probably going to make it further in the game than her. And while the episode spent a lot of time making it seem like Evie or Deshawn might go home, I turned out to be correct. What I will say, however, is that I wasn't expecting how we got here, though. What I thought was going to happen was that the old Lulus would try to stay together, but Erica and possibly Heather would flip to the old Yase and Ua members, and they would take a shot at that core Lulu alliance of Danny, Deshawn, and Sydney. But instead, it seems that the old Lulus were able to sit together while getting the old Uas and Lianna on their side, to where the three Yase were on the bottom. And Sydney ended up being collateral damage from a vote split between her and Evie. However, what's interesting there is that in that split, Sydney got 5 votes and Evie got 4 votes. So even if Evie had an idle plate on them, Sydney goes home anyway. Furthermore, the Yase Alliance all voted for Deshawn, which is probably be a better game move for them, as Deshawn is a more integral piece to that majority than Sydney is. So a lot of interesting stuff happens in this vote. In terms of the episode itself, Sydney didn't really show up until shortly before Tribal, where most of the episode was about the two sides going after Evie and Deshawn, as well as Liana breaking away from the old Yase. And I kind of called it to where that brief scene of Sydney right before Tribal was there to set up that boot while not making it super obvious, an editing trick that has been done before. Right before the vote, Sydney plays her shot in the dark, fails, and is sent out 5 to 4 to 3, with Deshawn using his extra vote. Overall, I think Sydney actually played relatively well in the pre-merge. While he can knock her for being voted out at the first tribal she attended, she was in the core majority alliance with Danny and Deshawn, and more than likely would have survived a vote even if Lulu had gone to a tribal pre-merge. I know I discussed the possibility of a Sydney blindside happening based on the edit, but in hindsight, it seems like the numbers wouldn't have been there for that anyway. She, Danny, and Deshawn were 3 votes right there, and that would have at least gotten them a tie. And while we saw Nasir discuss targeting Danny Deshawn earlier on, and we know later that Sydney didn't really like Nasir, we get content later of Nasir feeling included in their alliance, and Danny and Deshawn feeling like they had to work with Nasir to get out the women, specifically Erika. So while Sydney probably would have gotten votes had Luvu attended Tribal earlier, I think she ultimately would have had the numbers to stay. And even at the merge, yes, I'm calling this the merge, she was in the majority with the Luvus mostly sticking together and securing Liana and the old Uwas. The numbers were there for her, that group, to split the vote and take out Evie, even without Sydney's vote. The main point where you can falter is her position within that group. While she had been in Danny Deshawn's core during the pre-merge, we got evidence in these last 2 episodes of that core becoming less important in the game. We see Danny and Deshawn divert their focus between the men's alliance with Nasir and Xander, as well as the cookout alliance with the people of color. We even hear from Sydney in her exit interviews that she didn't really trust Danny Deshawn in that moment, which was part of the reason why she played her shot in the dark. And with it seeming like the cookout took center stage with all the people of color voting on the same side, that left Sydney as the most expendable person in that grouping. It's pretty damning when we see Deshawn of all people throw out Sydney's name as a safe vote, even though he doesn't actually vote against her. So even if her side had won that vote, it's pretty clear that Sydney would have been at the bottom moving forward. Granted, she could have tried flipping and forming a new group. Her and Xander might have been interesting. But it's tough to see how she gets to the end, as I don't think anyone was willing to actually take her that far. So while I don't think she played too bad in the pre-merge, I feel like she got lost in the shuffle once the merge hit. So it's not too surprising to see Sydney go here, given the edit and everything. But actually, from a gameplay perspective, I don't think she played the worst game in the world. So I have her here at number 12. Moving on to number 11, we have the 11 people still in the game, and for all we know, the 11 people that will make up the jury of the season. But the person I believe that has the least chance of winning is Heather. Now, again, this is not too surprising as she's been at the bottom for a while now, and I feel like her and Erika have been trading places the last few weeks in terms of who's at the bottom. But really, both of them are pretty bad edit wise to where I don't think they have any shot of winning. The reason I have Heather below Erica this week is I feel like again with this episode she got pretty much no content. Gameplay wise, she pretty much just followed orders, like sticking with the Lubus. Despite there not being that much of an interest for her to do so, I feel like she could have flipped if she wanted to. She could have worked with the old Yases to pile votes onto Deshawn to try to get Deshawn out. And you could say that she didn't like Heather, she didn't like Sydney, and that she was just voting with that vote split plan to take out Sydney. But we get almost no content of Heather actually putting this plan together, and it really seems like she's just following orders with the old Luvus. There's really no indication that she is planning to flip or really do much on her own. And we even hear from afterwards that like while Heather didn't like Sydney, we learn now that Sydney didn't really like Heather either. So that's not particularly too surprising based on that. And again, she just has no shot of winning. I feel like it's just the same story, different days with Heather. So I have her here at number 11. Now we're moving on to number 10, and we're talking about the other person I believe has no shot of winning, and that is Erica. Now, again, I feel like the reason I have Erica above Heather this week is because there's a bit more to talk about with Erica. Now, most of her focus in this episode came from the hourglass twist. Unsurprisingly, she decides to break the hourglass and change the game. I mean, I don't think there was really any reason or any chance, really, that Erica wasn't going to do this, and we get some confessionals from her explaining her decision. I say the most interesting one came right after the challenge, where she said her days of being a lamb on Luvu are over, and that she now wants to take more risks. It was an interesting follow up to the content she got in episode 4, where she talked about laying low and waiting for the right moment to strike. And considering she votes out Sydney here, someone she was targeting earlier on, and the thing that initially got her in trouble with the core Luvu alliance, I thought that was pretty interesting to see. The problem is that after the opening sequence of her decision and the challenge, she gets no content again the rest of the episode. If she had been the winner, or at least a strong contender, this would have been a major episode for her, and that storyline of her taking ownership for her decisions would have been a lot more prominent. But instead, it seems like nobody's mad at Erica or even cares, and we don't see Erica do much to get the votes onto Sydney at the end of the day. Overall, I feel like this episode was a massive missed opportunity for Erica. While she got a big confessional about becoming a bigger player, she was really a background character for most of the episode after the challenge. And her being a part of the vote split that took out Sydney, someone she talked about targeting the pre-merge, should have gotten a lot more focus than it did. But instead, much of her actions were unnoticed and unexplained. Now, could we get an explanation next episode? Possibly. But considering I'm already out on Erica, this hole in her edit is not what I'm needed from her in this episode. Now, gameplay wise, it seems like she's integrating more with the Cookout Alliance, and moving forward, that may be her best option. While she would have been in danger had the Hourglass twist not come into play, at this point, I think she has a bit more security. Now, will she get to the end? I don't think so. I mean, I still think she's probably going to get snaked out towards the end. And even if she becomes a bigger player, I feel like, again, she'll just be taken out as an obstacle for the eventual winner to overcome. Or even worse, she just gets taken out the next round as sort of an easy vote for the majority to take care of. As like Sydney, she could be relatively expendable moving forward. So I don't really see a path to the end for Erica. I could still see her being a big player, and I feel like that confessional could be setting that up. But given how silent her pre-merge was and how little how little content she actually got in this episode, I don't see her winning the game. I don't think she'll be able to get to the end, and I still feel certain that she is one of the people with the least likely chance of winning. So I have her here at number 10. Now we're moving on to number 9, and we have someone who is again towards the bottom of the pack, but really in this episode, they just didn't have anything going for them, and that is Nasir. Now, again, this was a quiet episode for Nasir. He voted in the majority against Sydney, and despite having an idol, he wasn't targeted by anyone, nor did Lianna consider using her knowledge as power on him, although I think that would have been her best move, strategically speaking. Now, overall, again, I'm not super high on Nasir's longevity. For the moment, it seems like he's in the majority, as he falls into the Lubu camp, the Men's Alliance, and the Cookout Alliance, so in theory, he should be well positioned there. And with Sydney gone, he's supposedly in a better position with Danny and Deshawn, to where I feel like they're more incentivized to keep Nasir around. And without Sydney being someone that doesn't like Nasir, I think that's something that's one less person that could be targeting him in the future. And again, I feel like for the short term, like next episode, I think he'll be fine. But I feel like there will be a flip at some point that will propel Yase back into power. And I feel like when that happens, Nasir will either be the first victim of that or be taken out soon after there. And again, even if this hypothetical flip doesn't happen, like again, I still see him as someone who will be taken out as being too likable, as being too much of a jury threat in moving forward. And beyond that, his edit has been very understated, surprisingly so. I feel like he really only comes up when he's absolutely necessary, and beyond that, he seems to be set up more as a fan favorite, someone that is very likable, but not someone that is probably going to win the game. So I still have him here at number 9. Now moving on to number 8, and we have someone who is in a bit more immediate danger than Nasir, but also someone whose edit has been a bit more vocal in recent episodes than his. So number 8, we have Ricard. Now, I feel like there's more setup to Ricard being boot in the next few rounds in the series. Like there's his split with Chantelle. I mean, there's also the fact that him working with the old Luvus is never really explained. Like, and how he's still working with Chantelle isn't really explained either. I mean, it makes sense for him strategically, as it's in his best interest to be a part of the majority. But again, I feel like there could come a point where Chantelle could try to flip the vote on him, like to where he'll probably be one of the next few boots. I feel like his edit could be setting that situation up. But I could also see him being recruited by the old Yases as a swing vote, someone that could be flipped to their side. Like I feel like with the setup of his rift with Chantelle, I feel like that's something that will come into play sooner or later. Now the question is, who will win that showdown whenever it happens? I think it depends on how the situation plays out. I feel like if it's a case of the old Yase is trying to flip Ricard to their side, then I think Ricard will flip and he will win that battle to take out Chantel potentially. But if it's just a straight up division between Ricard and Chantel, like if they're the two boots, two candidates to be eliminated, then I think Chantelle more than likely wins. Especially if that happens next week, then Ricard probably will go home. So I think there's definitely risk for Ricard in the immediate future. I mean, I don't think he's the most likely to be taken out next, but he's one of the top 2 or 3 people that are in the most danger coming to the next episode, in my estimation. Now, even if he does survive, I mean, again, I'm not sure who his end game is with. I mean, he doesn't seem to have any ride or dies at this point, especially with his rift with Chantel. I mean, maybe they could get back together, possibly, but I don't think they're going to take each other to the end at that point. And again, I feel like the edit is just not backing up a Ricard win. So, again, I don't think he'll win at this point. I think he's in more immediate danger than Nasir is, but because he's been getting a bit more consistent content than Nasir, I feel comfortable having him one spot higher, number 8. Now we're moving on to number 7, and we have someone who, again, has been middle of the pack for a while, but I don't think this episode was particularly great for him. But at number 7, we have Danny. Now, like I said, this wasn't the best look for Danny. I mean, first we have right after the challenge where we hear Danny complain about the twist, which I personally sympathize with, as Jeff straight up lied to them about having safety, as opposed to carefully parsing his words as he's done with previous twists. But then we have Deshawn talking him down, reminding him that Survivor is all about twists and how you have to be adaptable. And to me, that's not the best look for Danny, as it shows him being behind a curve on how the game is being played. From there, Danny is included on the majority's plan to take out Evie. You get a few more scenes with him, such as trying to get Lianna on board. But I'd say the most notable moment is when Xander tells him about Lianna's not just power twist, and that Evie is safe. Again, Danny isn't a major player in all this, but there is setup to him believing Evie will be voted out, only to later think that Lianna will be able to steal the idol from Xander, who would play the idol in Evie. And in the end, he is blindsided when neither of those things happen and Sydney goes home. So overall, this was definitely not a good look for Danny, as he's shown to not be much in the loop about what's actually happening. Gameplay wise, I think he's still in a good position. While losing Sydney wasn't great, he still has two options moving forward. He could either move forward with Xander and be part of his guys alliance, or he could focus more of his energy on the Cookout alliance. Granted, this episode didn't frame the vote as the people of color coming together, but I think that will allow Danny to remain in the majority, at least in the short term. Even so, I don't see him reaching the end from an Edgic standpoint. I still think there will come a point where he will be targeted, being in a position to where he would need to win out, which I don't think he'll necessarily do. But again, I feel like his edit again is kind of in the same ballpark as Ricard's. I mean, maybe a bit more circumstantial than what we've seen from Ricard. And I feel like his game position is a bit better than Ricard at this point, but I still don't think Danny's winning the game, so I have him here at number 7. Now we're moving on to number 6, and we have someone that has dropped a decent amount from last week. I mean, a lot of that is having to do with how this episode played out. And I know I've been high on this person in the past, but I feel like this episode was really bad for them. So at number 6, we have Lianna. Now, like I said, I feel like the knowledge is power twist was sort of a make or break for Liana's edit. And after this episode, I can say with certainty that this was a breaking point for her game. I know I've been high on her at the last few episodes, as it seems like she was starting to get a redemption arc for not taking risks and not getting out Xander when she had the chance in episode 2. I thought that the knowledge's power twist was her way of finally getting back at Xander, taking him out, and setting her up for the endgame. But this episode really undermined her during a lot of it. So first we see her continuing to work with Chantelle to the point where she has distanced herself from the other Yases. That was a misstep on her part as she ruins her relationship with the Yases and ruins her position as well. And edgically, we get plenty of negativity with the other Yasi members talking about not trusting Lianna or not sharing her knowledge power advantage and distancing herself from them in general. None of that was good. And I was becoming uneasy, especially as it was becoming more clear that she would use the power to try and steal Xander's idol. I mentioned earlier that the edit had been setting that up over the last few episodes. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that even if she succeeded in stealing Xander's idol, that wouldn't have been good for her as it would have ruined her position with the Yasi members. I mean, one of the reasons she's in this powerful position right now is because she has the Yasi alliance, but also has all the people on the other side, people like the Cookout and with Chantelle. I mean, and I feel like now she's putting all of her eggs in the Cookout and Chantelle basket, which isn't particularly great. I feel like the ideal move would have been to steal Nasir's idol, as Nasir is the one she has a weaker relationship with among the people that have idols, and obviously with the people that are up for elimination. But we get the tribal where we have that big moment. Liana uses the knowledge's power to try and steal Xander's idol, only for it to be revealed that Xander had passed off the real idol to Tiffany, and that he just had a fake to give her. And for me, that was the moment where I officially backed out of Liana's winning chances. Her episode before then wasn't great, but I was holding out to see how the power would be used. The reason I had her as high as I have on the power rankings is because I assumed that her storyline was pointing towards a redemption. People pointed out her $1 million mistake line as a knock to her edit, but I saw it as the start of a storyline where she would learn to take more risks and start to play more effectively. And when she got the knowledge's power, like a couple episodes ago, I thought this would be her moment, her chance to finally take control of the game and have that redemption be realized. So much of her placement on previous power rankings rested on her using this power correctly. But now that she has misplayed it, now that Xander seems to be winning this war between her and him, and now that she has distanced herself from Yase, which I still see as a try producing the winner, I no longer think Liana will win. Now, I think she'll be the next to go? No, I mean she still has the cookout, she still has her allies on the other side, and I think she's still in a decent position gameplay wise, like especially with Yase being down in the numbers. But I think there will come a point where the Yases will rise up and she'll be taken down. So I don't think she's going to win at this point. I think she'll be a factor in the post merge, but I no longer see her as the winner. So I have her here at number 6. Now we're moving on to number 5, and we have someone who again has dropped down a bit from last week, and this is the person that was almost voted out. We have Evie. Now, this episode was kind of better for Evie. I mean, not exactly. I mean, here we see them fall into the minority with them losing Lianna and both Uwas to the Lubu side. Worst of all is the fact that Evie is their main target. Considering Evie got so much content during the summit of them wanting to build a relationship with Deshawn, the fact that this didn't come to fruition at all isn't a good look for their edit. And from a gameplay standpoint, it's never good when you're the main target of the majority group. Now, logically, I actually thought there might have been a chance Evie could have gone home here. While I was confident Sydney had the most material to be a merge boot, an Evie boot would have produced a somewhat similar effect, but ultimately the Yase Alliance is able to outsmart Lianna by giving Xander's idol to Tiffany, which is something, and in the end, Evie is spared in a 5 to 4 to 3 vote. So overall, I wasn't too impressed by Evie from an Edgic standpoint after this episode. I feel like most of the focus from the Yase Alliance was on Xander, who was rumored to potentially play as idol for Evie going into that tribal. I feel like Evie is booned simply by being on Yase, which I see as the tribe that will produce the winner. However, this episode did little to make me think that they will actually win. Gameplay wise, Evie is still in the minority, and while they attempted to blindside Deshawn, they couldn't get the numbers to actually pull it off. And honestly, I could see Evie being the next boot. The core of the majority is still intact with Deshawn there, and I can see them targeting either Evie or Xander, possibly orchestrating a vote split to nullify the idol. And I think Evie is the more likely person to be voted out compared to Xander. I think if the group sticks together, Evie is the most likely boot in the Aussie Alliance. Now, with that said, there are opportunities to flip votes. I can see them trying to flip Erika, Heather, or Ricard. I can also see them trying to play off existing tension within the majority group, such as the rift between Chantelle and Ricard. So it's not a sure thing that Evie will go home, but they are in danger during this past episode, and I think they'll still be in danger coming into next week. So I have Evie ranked at number 5. Now we're moving on to number 4, and we're going to be talking about someone that I just mentioned, and that is Xander. Yeah, Xander's moved up quite a bit from last week, and I'll admit, I'm still not feeling great about Xander's overall chances. Like, I still think that his edit in the pre-merge was way too inconsistent and too negative and too circumstantial to really warrant a win. But I feel like compared to the rest of the field, I mean, he has one of the stronger edits at this point. I mean, obviously this was a good episode for him where he got a lot of content where he was talking about his idol and talking about trying to counter Liana's knowledge is power advantage. We see him going to Danny and trying to spread paranoia, which is part of the whole Yase Alliance's plan. And then we get to the tribal where he has a pretty awesome moment where Liana asks him, and uses the knowledge is power advantage to ask him for his idol. And all he has is a fake. And it kind of reminded me of the reveal that Nasir had found the Luvu idol, like where it sort of comes out of nowhere, and then they have this big flashback showing how everything went down. And I thought that was a great moment for Xander. It was cool seeing it in action, where we get this flashback of him, like pulling out this fake idol and giving his idol to Tiffany. I thought it was a good gameplay move. I mean, it was still kind of obvious. I feel like as yeah, I mean, the episode made it clear that everyone knew about the knowledge is power advantage. So the best way to counter that is to simply pass it off to other people, so that it's more likely that Liana won't know who actually has the idol in their hands at that moment. So I feel like the move was pretty clear, but it was still pretty effective, and I do commend Xander in the Yase Alliance for being able to pull it off. After that, they throw their votes onto Deshawn, but it's not really enough to get Deshawn out. However, they do win out the round where they majority splits the vote and get out Sydney instead. So pretty mixed bag gameplay wise, but that was still a pretty fun moment where he pulled out the fake idol. So overall, again, I feel like this was a better episode for Xander. This was definitely one of his stronger episodes of the season. Like, and I feel like at this point he will be a big player during this post merge. Now, will he win? I don't think so. I mean, I think his pre-merge is way too wonky and inconsistent to really warrant a win. But I do think that with the Yase tribe being the more complex tribe and likely to be these underdogs during the next couple of rounds, I can see Xander getting through that. I can see him being responsible for the flip that gets them back into control that will propel them towards the end of the game. But again, I just don't see how he wins based on how bad his edit was in the pre-merge, so I have him here at number 4. Now we're at number 3, and we have the highest ranked Luvu member again. We have Deshawn. Now, again, I feel a little weird putting Deshawn number 3, as this was a pretty strange episode for him. So, right after the challenge, he has a pretty good moment of reminding Danny that the game is constantly changing, which leads into a decent confessional about how Survivor is full of twists and how he needs to adapt. From there, he's in the majority group, forming the plan to take out Evie, but then I think his edit goes downhill. First, he becomes the target of Yase despite Evie talking so much about wanting to work with him back at the summit. Granted, Deshawn is targeting Evie, but it's never good when you're the target of the minority. Then, upon learning he's Yase's target, he tells everyone to vote for Sydney in order to make him feel comfortable, making him the one that has to be talked down by Chantelle and Lianna. Not the best look. Later on at Tribal, the Yase Alliance outplays Lianna with the knowledge is power advantage, causing the Tribal to go live and Deshawn to get more paranoid. Eventually, his group splits the vote between Sydney and Evie to where Sydney would go home no matter what, and I think that wasn't ideal for Deshawn's game as Sydney was still loyal to him, and Sydney in fact goes home here 5 to 4 to 3. One could say that the group planned to split the vote 5 to 5, only for it to be messed up when Sydney chose to use her shot in the dark. But considering there were only three Yases to worry about, and the fact that they knew the shot in the dark was a possibility, the Alliance not accounting for this is a misstep. And while Deshawn voted for Evie in the split, the fact that he got the content of being paranoid and offering Sydney as a safe vote isn't a good look for him. Finally, while losing Sydney isn't ideal, I'll admit that Deshawn also got a bit lucky here. I already discussed how Sydney was the most expendable person in the majority group, but I feel like Erika and Heather could have made a big move here had they joined the Yase Alliance in voting out Deshawn. It would have taken just two more votes to send him packing. So the fact that Erika and Heather stuck with him despite not giving much to them in return is fortunate on Deshawn's end. But overall, I still think Deshawn is in a good position gameplay wise, similar to Danny, where he could choose between the Guys Alliance or the Cookout, and I also think he can make it further than Danny. But this episode just wasn't good for him by showing him being paranoid after saying earlier in the episode that the game is all about twists. I thought there was a bit of inconsistency with how he was presented in this episode, so I don't know. I still feel like he'll make it decently far. I still think he'll be an end gamer, but his edit has been kind of all over the place, and it feels weird putting him at number three. But honestly, considering the rest of the field, I mean, he kind of has to be a number three, as I feel like he's less flawed than a lot of the other people we've already discussed. So I have him here at number three. Now we're moving on to number two, and this was a bit of an interesting selection. Again, I already called out this person as being a decoy winner, so it's a bit weird to put them back up at number two after saying that. But again, considering the rest of the field, I kind of feel like I had to put her up here. So at number two, we have Chantelle. So the thing about Chantelle is that I feel like this could go either way for her, where I feel like one could say that this was a bad episode for her in the sense that she wasn't shown very much on the show. I mean, she did get a couple lines here or there talking about how she wants to target Evie and how she's part of the plan, how she's close to Lianna, and she even helps calm Deshawn down when he's getting paranoid and tries to throw the vote onto Sydney. But aside from that, she isn't really shown being the main orchestrator of the plan in general. Now, one could also say that this was a protection episode. So this is one trait that you'll see in winner edits, where in rounds where the winner of the season, like is where the outcome of it is bad for their game, like they lose one of their closest allies, or if they're shown being in the wrong, the episode will tend to back out or not really show the winner as much in order to shield them from the negativity that would have to result from them getting content in that particular episode. So one could say that this was a bad episode for her gameplay wise in the sense that her closest ally Liana is like using this knowledge as power twist only for it to blow up in her face. But now that she didn't get that it's bad for Chantel's game as they're kind of more exposed now. But on the other hand, like she hasn't shown as much to where it could potentially save her moving forward. So I can definitely see that argument being the case. And she wasn't really shown being as flawed in that case as a lot of other players. And that's part of the reason why she is as high as she is right now is because it's not because I think she's necessarily the winner. I mean, I feel like at this point, so many people have so many holes in their edit to where it's hard seeing them win. And I feel like Chantel, as a result, is sort of propped up by the fact that this episode just wasn't as bad for her as it could have been. But I don't know. I still don't see her as a winner. I still think she got way too much content in the pre-merge and in general, to where I still think she's a decoy winner. But considering the field that we're working with, I decided to leave her here at number two for this video. And now, at number one, the person I think is the most likely to win Survivor 41 is Tiffany. Yeah, it's the same person as last week. And Again, I feel like this episode was a bit of a cool down period for Tiffany. She wasn't really as prominent compared to the rest of the Yase's. I mean, she was part of the plan to, like give away Xander's idol. Like she has Xander's idol at the moment and his extra vote. So she was part of that plan, but she didn't really get much content to really talk about it. And I'll be honest, I'm a bit surprised with how the game is playing out for her, strictly from a gameplay standpoint. I was pretty convinced going into this that like the Yases and the Uwas would be able to team up and flip Erika to their side to make them a new majority. But now it seems like the Yases are in the minority, and I feel like through that, Tiffany is becoming a bit of an underdog. Now, granted, this does play into the edit a bit, where we saw that great sea turtle segment a couple episodes ago, where the Yases are presented as underdogs, which further cements my belief that they will produce the winner, and Tiffany is the most likely winner of the Yases, in my personal opinion. So to see her actually be an underdog was a bit of a surprise from a gameplay standpoint. But given the edit, I have a lot of confidence that the Yases are going to push through. Like they might lose Evie along the way, but I think they will regroup. They'll be able to cause a flip and really take control of the game from that point forward. And I think in that case, Tiffany is the most likely winner of those people. Now, Xander could be a big player, as I mentioned previously, but I feel like in a final three scenario, Tiffany it would be more likely to get jury votes than Xander, somewhat due to age. I mean, I feel like Tiffany is more likely to command respect and more likely to convince people that she should be handed $1 million compared to a 20-year-old that's still in college. But I feel like aside from that, I could see Tiffany being a big player post merge. And again, that is part of the reason why I'm surprised that they're underdogs at this point. I'm convinced that Tiffany is the type of person that would play very aggressively post merge. So to see her not in the majority right off the bat is a bit surprising, in my opinion. But looking at the rest of the edit, I can see Tiffany and Xander working together to really take down some of these bigger threats. I can see her taking down Lianna. I can see her taking down like this Luvu alliance that seems to be taking control of the game. Now, one thing that I will knock her a bit for is the fact that she was, like, the fact that Sydney went home. Like Sydney was shown to not really trust Tiffany, and it was kind of implied that there was bad blood between them in the edit. So to not see Tiffany get any content explaining that was a bit of a letdown. I mean, again, it could be explained next episode, so that could work out in her favor actually. But again, I feel like it's a bit weird to still have Tiffany at number one, but I feel like this episode provided some clarity over who the contenders are. I think so many people have been knocked down by the edit, like they have different flaws, like whether it's inconsistency or in Liana's case, negativity or things not paying off. And I feel like of them, Tiffany, believe it or not, is the least flawed person from an Edgic standpoint. Now, again, she's not perfect. I mean, she barely got any content in this episode, but I still believe that this episode will vindicate her in the long run, and I feel like she will eventually come out as a winner. So for that, I decided to have her at number one. And there we go. That will do it for this week's power rankings of Survivor 41. I mean, now that we're in the merge, I mean, anything can really happen. I mean, I'll be very interested to see how the power dynamics play out next week, especially with this new majority group. I mean, there's a lot of division in that group, and I would be very curious to see how they fracture or if they can stay together or not. A lot of intrigue, a lot of great stuff to look forward to. And of course, with that comes more power rankings. So, like I said, stay tuned for more power rankings in the future. Like subscribe if you want to. And of course, there's more videos coming out in general about whatever I feel like talking about. So that's the video. See ya.